Hi, everyone. I'm Mix Rogers,
I'm Aaron.
and this is Mix Rogers and the Happiness Factory. So, welcome back. This is episode 3, and my friend Aaron here, you were so vulnerable and open talking about your mental health experience, your diagnosis, and how you've experienced 8 different mental health facility experiences. That it really did inspire me to go, okay, it's time. It's time to go through my spectrum of the journey and really get into it. So thank you, first and foremost, for your openness, because it created that space that I'm just really ready to share.
Yeah, of course. I do feel that, I think transparency, that's one of the things that I learned on my journey is that transparency and vulnerability are almost like a key to unlocking your potential and your truth, and full like understanding of what you're really going through is being able to kind of put it out there. So that's where I was
Yes, I'm
coming from.
curious. Do you? Because I feel like we'll stick on vulnerability for a moment. I feel like like most things, there's spectrums and layers. But I
Of course.
feel like I have I have done a true introspection to where I have been the most vulnerable with myself. But then, as soon as and I've been speaking it out loud, but coming onto just a larger platform and talking about this, it feels different. It's like a different type of vulnerability. Would you agree?
Definitely. Yeah, because that is, first you have to be vulnerable with yourself, of course, or you can't with anyone else. You don't know what you're talking about if you can't be vulnerable with yourself.
Mm,
So,
yeah.
it starts with yourself, but it is a totally different step going and saying it even to like a confidant. But then to go out to the general public and speak your deepest truths, it can be, let's just say different. It's a lot
Yeah.
different than,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's different from what we're conditioned in society as well. Like when you don't even
right,
have true access to your emotions and feelings and understand what they are, how could you even start talking about things that were traumatic in a healing way? I think that's been the balance as well.
right.
As we've talked about, I've gone through so many modalities of different types of holistic healing and therapies and including talk therapy, and even there's such a balance to talking about the experience, that traumatic experience you've had, to where you're not regrinding things up in a harmful way, but you're allowing those the stored and stuck feelings, emotions to release and to come out. And
Mhm.
so that's quite a balance. And so with that being said, so trigger warning for this episode, there's discussion of domestic violence and suicidal ideation. So with that said, so my journey really, I'd say really began in 2019 to June of 2020. And at that time, I was living in Raleigh, North Carolina. I was engaged to a man who had a child, and we had just bought a house a year prior. And June 2020, although it was the most intense, it wasn't the only one, but the relationship ended in a domestic violence experience to where my then fiance got taken to jail for the whole weekend. And I had a weekend to move out of this house. And mind you, this is right in that pandemic. And so it was that experience just on its own, just so wild. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful. I had local family that were gracious enough and allowed me to come stay with them. But I got everything in a storage unit. I took out what I can. And what was so wild already about that was that Monday after it happened was actually my third experience, my third communication with my then new therapist. And I truly had felt like I was ramping myself up to talk to her. I was a couple months away from the wedding, and I knew how unhappy. I didn't quite know how unhappy was. I just knew that I felt stuck and I felt trapped beyond belief, and I just felt like there was just nothing else I could do. And so I was talking to my therapist, and it just, everything came out. And she was like, well, I actually studied in DV, which we'll call it from here moving out. And with her guidance, her help, her support, and that aha moment for me happened. I was living, sleeping, working out in this one tiny room. And it hit me that if I keep going the rate I'm going, if I keep doing the same actions, I'm literally not going to make it out alive. Right? Like, it got close, it got dicey. So, grateful. I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful that what I did experience was a manageable amount of that time. But that epiphany changed the course of my whole life. At that time, I was so disconnected from my emotions, from my feelings, from my body, that I had no idea. I had no idea how to even communicate and talk about them. I suppressed, as so many of us do and are conditioned to do. I was expert at suppressing all of these emotions and worries and fears and anger. And with that going, after a couple more rounds, she really understood the fact that, like, I needed data. I had an analytical brain, and at that time in 2020, she goes, well, the average right now is 1 in 9 people go back to their partner after DV, and that's average. To me, that is an absurd high number, knowing that there's so many more in there, and that was in 2020, and I know so many don't get reported. She also then mentioned that females are biologically structured to forget pain. She's like, why do you think women would have a second child? She's like, if they truly remembered and understood that excruciating pain without the any medicine or anything like that, even still, they probably wouldn't, And that just really got my brain going. It helped me make sense of a very nonsensical time of my life. And what I had realized was my whole reality was wrong. I had been gaslit for so many years that I truly didn't have any guidance. I didn't have any knowing of what I was to do. I felt like I was just moving through all the motions of life, but in a toxic, negative, anxiety, depressed way that I had no idea. I didn't even know back then that I had anxiety and depression. That's a whole bananas thing. So fast forward to moving through that experience and healing through that, and I have we will have lots of content talking about those experiences and whatnot, and how to truly to move through. Again, it'd be all from my perspective. This is not how this is blanketed overall. But anywho, I moved. That September, October of 2020. Although I had a year restraining order, the whole just area felt very triggering. So I moved to where I'm at currently in Wilmington, North Carolina. And, that's just where life even took more of a turn of just truly understanding how unsafe that not only I had felt in that time, but in my entire life. I started healing and working more with a therapist and going, I don't actually think I've ever felt safe. I had a instance where somebody tried to break into our house when I was a child, and it was pretty traumatic of what I witnessed, how my brother handled it, all the things. And I was unable to ever sleep in a room without a door, specifically also a door being locked. And then I came here and I moved and I bought a house because trying to fill a very big void. I was realizing when, hindsight. But buying a house and living here and being completely alone and not even feeling like I could celebrate and tell, share out to the world as people do, about these things, because although the percentage was so minute, so small, all that was running through my head was, if I posted a picture of my house, that my ex could maybe reverse Google image search it and come find me and hurt me. Again, that tiny, small percentage, but there was still that lingering thought. And I realized that was what opened up my whole understanding of, I don't even know who I am. I don't know who I am in myself, in my body, in my mind, or in this world. And so that got me here, to Wilmington. And that then became the bigger unfolding of anxiety, depression, and burnout. Truly understanding that, like, what I've just been through, what I experienced, it was constant. It was a constant experience with ADHD symptoms, being myself autistic brain wiring, but unknowing any of these things. And I started working, I was already working at a corporation, at a tech company, and working then remotely in winter of a pandemic in a new city where you couldn't go anywhere. And I was then having debilitating dietary issues and restrictions. My whole body went pretty much full celiac. I had to remove gluten. Dairy proteins show up in the body like gluten, so I had to remove dairy. Couldn't process meat oils. I wasn't able to have garlic and onions for like a year. There's something called high FODMAPs. And so dietary-wise, body-wise, my entire being was shifting and changing mentally. I was in a completely different space. Can't really ever go back to where you were after experiencing something like that of a trauma. Nor would I ever go back. So working at that corporation, what also happened was George Floyd and everything of the 2020 and the other names that I apologize aren't coming to me right now. We'll put them on the screen. I'm going to take a moment for everyone there actually with 2020 and George Floyd. Peace unto everybody. So because of that, performatively, but also at least progressively moving forward. That's when most corporations started getting diversity, equity, inclusion, DEI, at least programs or departments. We had something called DEI communities. So they were, for example, they were Pride, Asian Network, Blacks United in Leadership, and then I was the global chair of the Mental Health and Neurodiversity, or MIND. And it really came about because World Mental Health Week, World Mental Health Day was coming up, and the company that we were acquired from had a whole week dedicated to programming, and it was just up to our community to maybe put on a session or two. And I was like, no, that's not how my brain works. I was like, oh, we can do better. And I ended up making it a week, a whole week, on top of, by the way, the full-time job I was having that was already a toxic experience, and I was already burnt out and depressed. The trauma trait in me that that was bring on more, because that allows the inability to pause, I guess. It's just you're so used to doing more and going, and I was filling so many holes and voids and things like that. And so it was really ironic. Like the irony was not lost on me that I was experiencing depression waves and high anxiety as I was planning World Mental Health Week. But utilizing that truly just by being this chair of this community of something I knew very little about. At that time, I had just really started understanding ADHD, or started thinking that that could be something that I was experiencing So that was very, very new at that as well. And no matter what, when you are in a chair position of a global community where you have global chats, you're experiencing some intensity, some toxicity, the inability to really understand somebody from the US, right? Mental health here is so stigmatized, it's not even talked about in other countries. If you're having a mental burst, it is just swept under the rug and not talked about. And so, right, what I learned there, and in planning like the second World Mental Health Week that second year, I held open spaces with all the regions, just to get on and talk about mental health and talk about what we were doing. And with the APAC region, Asia Pacific, getting on with them, it was mostly just me talking, talk about my experiences, anxiety and depression, things like that. And somebody came on off of microphone, and they said, honestly, I did not think anxiety and depression were real until you started talking about it. And I said, wow. Thank you. Right? I was like, yeah, wow. That's huge. That's huge. And I said, but I did. I said, thank you so much, because you're vocalizing something that I know so many people, just even on this call, but in the world, believe. Because how would you, if it's not taught, and we're all conditioned to not be talking about these things, and then let alone cultural obstacles and additional barriers. For us to be able to talk about it, for how grateful I am that I was in a space and at that corporation that I could create these spaces to talk about it. But so with that, I ended up then becoming so passionate about it that of mental health and neurodiversity and learning, just because for the first time I was learning about myself. I felt like I had more of a guidebook to how I processed the world and how I've been processing it. And the more I learned about ADHD, the more I learned that following year about autism and how that affects females completely differently, or on both sides. And then just truly understanding how stigmatized mental health is, and how the more I communicate, the more vulnerable that I was talking about it, the more passionate that I was getting in, no, let's just actually keep talking about this, right? Like the fact that you and me are having this conversation, and we're not hushing, we're not tiptoeing around anything. That's what destigmatizes a concept. But when you draw attention to it, if you're out, you're talking to somebody and you lower your voice, talking about it, right? That's just highlighting that this thing is not okay. We don't use the word normal in the neurodivergent community, excuse me, because what is normal? But it's been really, really utilized against anyone who is not neurotypical. But anywho, I digress. So with that, all to say, getting to be a part of that, and I also was getting so into the DEI side of things as well. I joined DEI groups, like associate-based groups. I ended up getting sponsored to do a 6-week certification course with University of South Florida, and it was also pretty fascinating just getting to be and communicate with other chairs from all these other groups. Right, these are all these people's extra work on top of their already daily lives. Most of them had families and animals and all these things. And you're with these individuals who are just already so burnt out, so exhausted, so unseen by their current jobs. I was very one of the few white people in this group, so unseen by the world at large. And then also getting to talk about the fact that mental health and neurodiversity, it spans across all communities, right? Like it knows no bounds of color or how much you make. It's brain wiring and trauma traits and yeah. So that leading me into the pit, I will say, the pit of despair and isolation, loneliness, and feeling alone, feeling so exhausted by the constant corruption within the corporation, not just on the corporate side, but also the people side, on how dangerous and problematic people from all around the world, that when you're not know how to communicate to somebody, and then all the life experiences, right? Like the constant war and turmoil, and right, you hear that within the communities, and you provide spaces, but like you're hearing that nonstop in the world, and then you're on social media and you're scrolling, and it's constant. And so I'm constantly burnt out from work. I have a toxic manager relationship, toxic hire. Like it's very intense, very dangerous for psyche. Experiencing such high levels of anxiety that my body starts breaking down on me in a way that I never would have thought. And to the point where I was experiencing chronic full body pain 24/7. Even when I was asleep, it was painful. And that included about a year and a half lockjaw. I couldn't hold a pen for more than 2 minutes or even walk down the street without feeling excruciating pain. And that was also really challenging because one of the a common mental health exercise is exercise, right? It's going out for a walk, it's getting fresh air, it's doing this and this. But that was becoming so problematic because I was physically unable to do those things. And so that's just like the neurodivergent community has heard so often, just journal or just do this X, Y, and Z. And you're like, if you physically can't do these things, if you mentally can't do that, anybody who is saying those things, or like just resources that have that out there themselves, are so problematic and toxic, because all that's doing for an individual who doesn't currently know that that's not all that there is, all that was doing was making me feel even worse. It was on top of not being able to just do the dishes, not be able to keep my house in a space. There was so much adulting. There was so many house tasks. Right? I bought a house. The work tasks, the additional DEI tasks that were still giving me a little something. Challenges with meeting people in this pandemic in a new city. My social life, my family life, with not experiencing any type of support. If anything, just grinding me down and down and down. To where I went to the ER twice, and they still weren't enough. Those 2 visits still was not enough for my brain to wake up and say something has to change. The first ER trip, because I was on a global events team, and I was literally in the middle of it was like 26 sessions that like were having to go. I was literally driving to the emergency room, communicating to all these people, and sitting in the waiting room working, because that was at that time more important than my actual physical health. And that second time feeling like it was I woke up at like 6 a.m. and it felt like it was like the most excruciating heart pain I've ever felt. I experienced heart palpitations, or have in the past. But this one, it came on and started radiating and just getting bigger and worse. And I ended up driving myself to the ER and getting shown in immediately to the heart pain. They ran all the tests. Nothing was wrong. They gave me, the pain was so intense, they gave me morphine for the first time. It didn't work. It took an extra booster for it to kick in. And side quest on that, actually. So with the morphine, by the way, this is really, I use this a lot when I talk about different thought channels that are happening within a being. And I called mine train stations. So for me, say I have 7 train stations and with all the lights on. And at any given time, I could be having up to, to five competing conversations or thoughts inside my head. And finally, when the medicine started coming on, I could feel it, because all of a sudden the lights, one by one, started shutting off to where it just got down to 1. And then that 1 became slower. It was the most wild thing I had ever experienced, because that was brand new. I had never had that kind of calmness and quietness in my head. So much so that I started crying immediately when I started feeling the morphine coming off, because the lights started coming back on. And I was crying because I now experienced an existence to where there weren't so many voices and so many spirals happening at any given time, or having to just questions and constantly thinking about the past, constantly thinking about the future, not even somehow in the present, and all of that. So the best that they could come up with, the doctors gave me costochondritis. But really, and I even asked, I was like, could this have something to do with this high immense of stress and anxiety that my body has been in for ever? I've pushed my understanding of when my anxiety highly started was when I was 2. I actually used to hold ice in my hands. Like, I would go to the fridge and ask my family for, like, to hold ice in my hands. I'm still learning now. Like, I'm thinking 2 things were happening, because I know if you put ice on your vagus nerve when you're having a panic attack, it can help reduce. I've tried it, didn't help so much. But so potentially there was something there, but I also know I was then also getting attention from my family. So there's probably a balance there. So, but experiencing, anxiety, I'm 34 now. So experiencing for over 30 years or so, what was actually happening was the buildup of stress, of anxiety, of everything that had been just stored and compressed and filed away and down, but wasn't actually gone. And so I actually recall coming home from the ER that time and still thinking that I could have, I'm in bed, so might as well pop open my laptop, because we were in, again, busy season. I was running 34 global events. And that's where I was. That's where my mindset was, that my worth was so connected to my productivity and to the remnant, the job that I had, the existence that I had. It was all I knew. And needless to say, that was the most problematic thing that could have ever happened. My body was literally shutting down on me in the most intense ways. And I wasn't listening. I still wasn't listening. Which was strange, because at that time, over the last 4 years, I dove into every type of healing modality that my resources could get into, right? And we talk, and that this is a big part of where I get to truly acknowledge my white privilege being in the U.S. and my openness and my ability to do that. I had a corporate job that with a salary. I have access. I have a car. I have access to go and do these things and try these things. And so what was so infuriating to me, which obviously was just adding even more spice, was the fact that I was doing all of these different healing modalities. I was bringing in so many things to my routine to try, and it just it felt like nothing was working. Still, it felt like I was just there, which now looking back, right, all of those things were actually at least keeping my head above water, but I was still drowning. And that's what it was. I was drowning. And beginning like March of 2023, that was the first day that I could not get out of bed physically due to what I had then very much accepted, that I had mental illness. And I was like, that shit only progresses. This doesn't change. This doesn't just get better. And at this point, I was hopeless. I was helpless. I was lost. I was so very lost. And so again, to the privilege of this corporation, I got to apply for short-term disability leave. I figured out my care team. I'll have a whole conversation about that whole process. But being able to get off, I originally got 6 weeks off, which that is nothing. That does nothing. It's laughable. I truly believe. By 6 weeks, that was how long it took me to start detaching that my productivity did not equal my worth, and that to give myself permission to maybe binge something on media or just go do this X, Y, and Z. My brain was still like, okay, I'm on short-term disability leave. I need to do something. I need to heal. I need to do more therapy. I need to do X, Y, and Z. I need to do. And I was like, well, that seems like this whole point is also to not do, to figure out how to actually stop. And so I'm thankful that I was able to apply for an extension. And I actually ended up getting 4.5 months total, which still I would say was not enough, but it was enough for what I needed to get to a healing place, to then get back to work, to realize how awful and burnt out it all still was going to be, to make larger changes. But that 4.5 months, Erin, it changed my life. I truly got to stop. I got to start feeling what it was like for my body to not be hurting anymore. But I was still experiencing this desperation because I still mentally, I was crumbling. And when I got the extension, I had already been looking into ayahuasca about a year prior and just preparing myself for that. And so I got the extension and I go, okay, let's do it. And I found this incredible retreat in Costa Rica. It was a week where you go. It was no phones, no journals, no books, no nothing. And you went and you were with 7 other people, and you experience it. Sure, we'll have another conversation about it. But by the second medicine ceremony, I was walking around the compound barefoot with ease. I went there with the intention to heal my body. I didn't go with the intention to mentally do any things that you could utilize with the medicine if Mama Ayahuasca is called to do that with you. But I went with the intention of needing to heal this physical vessel, and heal it did I. And so I was able to start eating gluten there. I then did solo travel after, and I came home. And that is when I realized that all my values have changed. My goals, my vision, my mission. And I couldn't go back, but I had to. I had to go back to the job, the whole world that I was in. But then it felt like that square peg in a round hole. So I went back to work, and so here's a couple of things that happened all in like a week. So I was still I got sick a couple weeks leading up to it because I was stressing about going back to work. I get back, and they had completely changed my entire role. They took my job away, like the aspects of it that like I actually cared about, and like yeah, and then the electricity in my 1970s house completely went out, and I had a 17K bill come with that. And so all of these things were happening. And the first thing that came to my mind was gratefulness. I was grateful that my house didn't burn down because it was right about to. I'm grateful that although I was sad about my role changing and I didn't get to compare it apples to apples, I knew that I was wanting to feel not guilty to leave the role, to leave the job. And I knew that no matter whatever I was going to be learning, it could help me. It could benefit me in my future. And I knew then I had the job that could pay for that bill at that time. So I was able to access gratefulness, and that came from that 4 years prior of all that work and all that healing and all that efforting. And but being back at that job, being back in this grind after getting to truly be so free and so liberated, I hit another really intense, probably the next darkest time of my life. And so I got called. I was healing with different also medicines, right? We will talk a lot about flower, THC, mushrooms, tobacco, things like that. But I was doing a few mushroom experiences, and I got called to do a small one and go to the beach. And it was a Friday before Halloween. And I get there, and it was very Ernest Hemingway of a day. It started being very stormy and started raining on the beach and getting just really dark. And I was called, like, stay and experience it and be there. And I'll definitely go further into like the specifics of this, but the story of that being, I hit a level of depth, of darkness, to where I realized that I didn't want to do this anymore. I didn't want to feel trapped in this world, in this life, this body. I had left that DV experience, and I said, like, I never wanted to feel trapped like that again. And I even started making sacrifices with family members, and realizing that I couldn't allow anyone in my life who was going to be treating me in a way that I did not want or felt worthy of or to deserve. But what I was realizing was it felt like there's a voice that came in my head and said, the only way out is through. The only way out is through. The only way out is through. And I'm sitting on the beach, and the only thought that comes to my mind is, so does that mean maybe it's like, okay, maybe it's like I'm in my pod in the movie The Matrix, or in a couple other references we'll throw up there. But I was feeling like I wasn't, like this wasn't real. I just kept feeling like this existence is not real. And I kept hearing the only way out is through. And I kept feeling really called that there is something larger. There's a much greater purpose and thing happening outside of this realm of Earth that I needed to be and get to. And so the only thought that came to me when that voice kept repeating that was, I needed to walk through the water, like into the ocean, like it wasn't there, like it wasn't ocean, and keep going until reality changed. And like, mind you, like I was very aware of the entire time. It's not like when I was on the mushroom trip, it's not completely taking over the brain, but like I was fully engaged. I was fully in it. And needless to say, like I knew I couldn't. I knew no matter what, I couldn't do it. But then that left me in a even more strange place, because I kept going, then how then could I stay here knowing what I know and just keep roboting on in this society? That felt even more conflicting. And so I just remember sitting on that beach and closing my eyes and started crying and chanting and screaming. And I told myself I would not open my eyes again until it was a world that I wanted to be in. And so I was there for however many hours. And I finally opened my eyes. And I was like, okay, what do I do from here? That was the most bizarre and intense experience of my life. The fact that I'm so grateful. I've actually never had suicidal ideation throughout my life. I definitely had those high anxiety parts of like, what would it be like if you're driving on the highway and you like go over the median or something? Like my one therapist said that's just like really high anxiety. But like it was never a suicidal ideation in the I'm planning on how to unalive myself to no longer be here. So I had never experienced that. Which again, it's such a grateful thing. If you don't, if you don't experience that, take that as a gratefulness as well. And so, just understanding that, like that was the only thought that came to me. And I started leaving. I left the beach, and I was like, I have no one to call. I have nobody. I started going through a list of people. But they would have had too much backstory. I would have had to care more about their feelings and me telling about this really intense experience. And so I had no one. I had no one to call. And I'm driving home, and there's this great bar called Sea Witch, and I heard some live music. And I'm like, well, F it. So I went, and mind you, it's on and off raining. It's still cold. And I just go, and I'm sitting there, and I'm listening to this incredible singer. And all of a sudden, this group of people come. It's 8 people. They come and sit. And I look at this guy's jean jacket. And on the back, it says, "Death is an acceptable option." And I just go, okay? Okay, what's that trying to say? And so in that moment, I said, okay, well, maybe maybe this is something I'm going to choose. Maybe this is more of I choose when I go out, and I make it more meaningful. It's something bigger than that. And that, I don't know, it did something for me. Again, it wasn't like I wanted to unalive myself, but it was like having the option. It allowed me to keep living for a little bit longer. And so then I left. I went home, and it's when things had to change even more. It's when I said, okay, things are still not okay. I know I'm feeling better than I've ever felt, but I am still feeling awful and terrible, and I'm still having these thoughts that are really dark and really deep, and I'm doing all of these tools that I'm learning on how to change the thought pattern and pause the thought spiral and do all of these things. And it's when I finally was like, okay, the only way things are fully going to change is if I take the leap and I change my lifestyle and I live my life to my purpose that I'm truly feeling. And I pushed it as long as I could, but in it was like March, April, May time of this year of 2024, I quit my job with no thought of what I'm going to do next. No job in mind, just I needed to quit. I needed to be done. And that is where then I find myself, and we're in August of 2024. And this time that I've had, I mean, I needed an extension, so I took out my 401k, and I lived off that until I'm there. I'm done now, and this is my only option. The healing, and now talking about healing and helping others. This is my option number one. A lot of people want to know motives. I get in a lot of beautiful, deep conversations with individuals, and we talk about how do we heal ourselves, how do we help each other, and how do we heal the universe at large. And the biggest thing that happens, like the most common reference is, well, okay, but like, what's your motive? Like, why? And usually it's, somebody wants to make money. People want to help, but at the end of the day, like, you still need to be able to live. So there's motives in being able to do those things. And in this time period, right, you and I had met, and we were starting to talk about that there's other options. There's other ways to do this, to live this life. right now, this is just what so happens to be the conditioned lived experience. This patriarchal capitalistic reign, let's say for the last 5,000 years, it's a script. It is programming. But that's not the only way. And so the more I was understanding healing, the more Aaron and I have been talking, it's, okay, sure, we can heal ourselves. I'm proud of myself. I am officially out of burnout, and I am managing. I'm in burnout. I'm past burnout recovery, and I'm in management mode and living mode. And I've also been able to go back over the last 5 years and distill down. I've digitized all my notes, and I'm creating the tools and going, okay, not only did I figure out how to get here because I had to, but I believe I figured out how to communicate this so other people can too. And so the motive is I don't want to live in this society anymore. I don't want to be here anymore. If it's going to continue to be like this, I can't. I'm unwilling. And anything we do, it would still be a square peg in a round hole, because we can create all the healings. We can do all the goodness that you and I are setting out to do. But if society doesn't change, then we're still going to crumble. And that's where you and I are at right now, and getting to utilize, and we're creating these spaces, and we're starting to talk about something called the better day. And I believe next episode is where we're gonna really get more into it. But what we're gonna say here to pause this out is, 1, you're not alone. 2, I see you, I hear you, and I believe you. And 3, it does not have to be like this. And together, in a unified understanding of what the better day truly is, which doesn't just come from one perspective, it doesn't come from one path, we can truly change the world so where we are all actually able to live and breathe in a way that we get to have our needs taken care of, so that we can focus on our healing, so that we can focus on our purpose. And with that, I just want to say thank you. I want to thank anybody listening, watching. These are going to be some really intense topics that we get into. We are talking literally about changing society as a whole. We're also saying that it's possible. I want to say, come along this ride with us with an open mind, and we can help you also with that. Because if I don't want to live in this world anymore, I certainly know there are many others who don't either. But there's a space for you. There is a place, and you have a purpose. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to just kick it over to you, Aaron.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that is so difficult to do. But yeah, just know that you were definitely heard. You were definitely felt.
Thank you, my
and
friend.
I want to say that though my experiences are totally different than yours, I feel like we've come truly, like what we've been talking about, coming to this place where we're working on the same thing. We've come here on different paths, but we've truly, after hearing your story, we've truly come to the same point, not just the same projects that we're working on, but really like in saying that you wouldn't want to live in this world as it is if you can't make it better, if you can't help to make it, if you're not doing something for it to change, then almost like what's the point of living, right? And I literally, that is where the Happiness Factory came from. So yeah, I feel the exact same thing. And the why and the motive for why we're doing this, I heard, like, I didn't want to interrupt you, but at so many points I was like, oh my gosh, me too, me too, me too. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I really, we'll do this. We have to. I mean,
We have to.
And we're, of course, we're not the only people that
Yes.
that feel this way, because I mean, I know personally other people have felt this way. I know people that do feel this way. It's just so society as it is in such a state that to jump off of the societal wagon and think for yourself is truly, like, it's such a hurdle that I mean, we see the symptoms of that hurdle in the fact of so much just negative consequences. And since we are on the topic, I will say there's constant I mean, there's people in severe depression at all times, and there's people unaliving themselves just at an alarmingly constant rate. And it really is, it's not a life problem, it's a life right now problem, society-wide. Like, and
That's
yes. That's why we're here. That's why we're here on camera right now. Otherwise, we'd be, who knows?
Yeah, but, right. Playing the game, living still in it. And you brought up a point that, please, or not. Wow. And that what that triggered for me was so many people were experiencing just massive amount of anxiety and depression and burnout. And something that was caused even more challenges for me throughout all of it was that immediate thought was, well, someone has it worse. And so I know I have a whole stream of, yes, absolutely. There are individuals who have it much, much worse, in so many different intensities and layers. However, that does not invalidate, right? Like, we are not looking to invalidate our own experiences, because that does us no good, right? I tell people now, and we're building a burnout recovery program right now, actually. And what I keep telling my people that we're gonna have go through that is, right now, you're useless to me. You're of no use in the kindest, most loving way. Your burnt out, anxiety-driven, depressed self is so squeezed that you are not actually helpful to our cause, the larger cause. But those are the people, right? Those DEI leads, those chairs who sit in a room who are doing, those are the individuals, right? We're creating a program to heal the healers, because those individuals are who we're bringing into this story, into this cause, because they are the ones through, right? The voices who are doing this work that just seems nonstop pain and torture. I digress there, but coming back to somebody has it worse, we have programming and understanding of, hey, here's how you can change those thoughts around, because, right, I was useless until this moment, until I fully healed myself. There was no way. The burnout and depression was so intense that there would be no way that I'd be building a corporation right now, a whole media player with you, right? Like, the things that we're doing right now, it just wouldn't be possible. And so that is why it is so critical to validate the feelings that you're having, and still knowing that there are other individuals who are experiencing something on a different spectrum and intensity, using a gratefulness practice. And that's triggering, so we'll get into that another time. We've definitely said a good amount on this episode. So please let us know what else you would like to hear more. We're going to talking more about the better day, start talking more about the happiness factories. You're going to continue to see more and more more voices with Mixed Rogers and friends to explain that there's not just one path that we're getting there. It's multiple paths, but and we have help, we have support. So thank you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're just so grateful that you're here, because that means you're ready. That means you're open and ready for something different, and that change is coming. I know you all feel it. So please join us on another episode. Check out all our content library we're building right now on TikTok and YouTube, and then we are going to continue expanding out. But have another ease and peaceful moments as much as you can. But peace and love to you, my friend.
Peace and love to you and to everyone watching.
And to everyone watching. All right. Bye, all.